It's where the sharps and sports fans unite. This is Informed Risk Taking, presented by Delphi Sports. Brennan Hall, better known as B Hall, here alongside with you, coming to you live from Columbus, Ohio, for episode number 4 of Informed Risk Taking. A friendly reminder, on this show, we do not gamble. We simply provide you the insight to take the best informed risks. You can also follow along for everything Delphi Sports on Twitter at Delphi Sports and Delphi Sports IRT. We also are on Instagram at Delphi Sports, so head over to IG and give us a follow. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Delphi Sports. Follow us on Spotify, Stitcher, and now Apple Podcasts. Make sure to search Informed Risk Taking, all of those podcasting applications, wherever you get your podcasts at. And this will be where all of our content will be posted for your convenience on YouTube and all of your other podcasting sites as well. So today we'll be covering a lot of topics for this Informed Risk Taking show today. We'll get into UFC Vegas 22 preview with Liam Picks Fights. We also do have a new rule on the show coming from the NBA, and we're going to talk about the promising Indiana Pacers, Minnesota versus Colorado in the NHL, also an East Coast battle for bragging rights between the Islanders and the Philadelphia Flyers too. So without further ado, let's get started and talk to our usual suspects of risk informants. And all the way from Warwick, New York, it's Liam Picks Fights, who has the pleasure of speaking with me about UFC Vegas 22. Liam, how we doing?
I'm doing quite well, B-Hall. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, glad to have you again, too. Thanks for filling in for me the other day. Did a fantastic job. I was able to catch the recap of episode 3 of IRT, so happy to be back in the host chair, but thanks for keeping it warm for me. So let's go ahead and get into UFC Vegas. I know you want to talk about 3 fights, specifically the main event, the co-main event, and then the lightweight prelim moving forward. So let's jump into the main event. You got the breakdown of Kevin Holland and Derrick Brunson. First and foremost, Holland comes in 21-5 overall. His overall record in the UFC is 8-2. His last 5 fights, he's gone a scorching 5-0. He's got the orthodox stance. He's standing at about 6'3" and has an 81-inch reach. And on the flip side, talk about Brunson. He's 21-7 overall. He is 12-5 in the UFC. So got a couple other bouts under his belt. And he's got a southpaw stance. He stands at 6'1", 77-inch reach. But both these guys seem decently similar in terms of record, height, and weight. Where are you in terms of picking a favorite moving forward right now?
B-Hall, I think you make a great point. When you talk about a lot of the similarities between these guys, if you look, Derrick Brunson normally fights guys that have a little bit shorter reach than him. But Kevin Holland has an exceptionally long reach for the division. He's a long, lanky gentleman. He's got great power in his hands. He's got long, rangy strikes. There's a lot to love about Kevin Holland. He went 5-0 in the UFC in 2020, and he's a fan favorite. And I think that that's where the market is reflecting right now, which is that Kevin Holland is well-known. He's well-liked. And I think that a lot of people have made money betting on Kevin Holland. Again, especially if you had been backing him in 2020, every time out, it was profitable for you. So I think that Kevin Holland is the public side this week, and I'm going the other way for a number of reasons. Up front, I'm going to disclose my one bias in this fight is that I had the same college wrestling coach, that Derrick Brunson had, Jamie Gibbs, and I know that Derrick Brunson is a very quality wrestler, not just from his mixed martial arts career, but I've had the pleasure of watching some of his college tape as well. And Derrick Brunson's a hammer. He has excellent takedowns. He has great takedowns from the single leg, from the body lock. I think that more recently in his UFC run, he's been disciplined about how he enters the clinch. He's been dragging guys to the mat, and he's really been exploiting people in the in-between stage. So as he gets you to start wrestling, he'll punish you with hard punches. And Derrick Brunson has taken out a lot of talented strikers, guys that thought that they were going to, come in and just strike with Derrick. He's taken those guys out too. So I believe that Derrick Brunson has the tools to win this fight. I think that the opening price for this fight was pretty close to accurate. They opened it with Derrick Brunson minus 120. The return on Kevin Holland there was plus 100. And now what we're seeing is that the market has, basically pushed Kevin Holland to almost the minus 200 range on some books. It's definitely floating minus 175 or so market average, even a little bit higher probably today. And so I think that I'm going to take the stab, Derrick Brunson, 1 unit at plus 150. I think that this is close to a pick'em fight. Again, if you were talking about the advantages for Kevin Holland, he's got the height and the reach here, but it's not pronounced. And I think that he's used to having a bigger height and reach advantage. I think he's going to be a little surprised in this fight when Brunson is landing in some of those exchanges. But I really think that Kevin Holland has been taken down in the first 30 seconds of a lot of his UFC fights. He has a hard time staying off the ground. I want to say he's been taken down 19 times in 11 fights in the UFC. And not all of his takedowns were given up against elite top position wrestlers. These are Gerald Meerschaerts of the world. These are bottom 25 type middleweights, maybe guys outside of the rankings looking in that Kevin Holland's getting taken down by and having really hard fights with. So I believe that Derrick Brunson is the side for me this weekend. I think that Kevin Holland, if he's going to win this fight, is going to win it by knockout, and he's probably going to do it fast. So I would say if you're going to be backing Kevin Holland this weekend, I'd look into Kevin Holland inside the distance or Kevin Holland by knockout. I think that I might be taking a small hedge play on Kevin Holland by knockout round 1 at plus 550. When Derrick Brunson has tended to get finished in the UFC, it's when he's rushing. It's when he's coming in hyper-aggressive. And again, he's coming against a guy who is going to have the reach, so he's going to have to close distance here. I'd be a little worried in the opening exchanges for Derrick. I think that his cardio is better. I think his wrestling's better. I think he's got the striking to hang with somebody like Kevin Holland. And I think that Derrick Brunson is the side for me this weekend.
Well, it is pretty cool the fact you share the same college wrestling coach as Derrick Brunson as you did yourself, too. So that's actually pretty cool, Liam, too. I never knew that about you. But now let's move on to the co-main event, too. So we have Gregor Gillespie and Brad Riddell. Gillespie looking 13-1, winning his 5 out of his last 6 fights. But this is only the 5th time that he's been in Vegas for UFC 22. That'll only be his 5th time. And then so moving to Riddell, he's 9-1. He's gone 6 out of 6 his previous 6 fights. And most recently, he won in September 2020 against Da Silva Coelho in UFC 253, and he's 3-0 under the UFC banner. And again, much like in the main event, this co-main event, both guys really seem to be rolling. So where are you leaning here early?
See, I think we've got a couple of really well-matched fights for this card.
We really do.
In the co-main event and the main event, what you're seeing is not only some size parity between the athletes, but what you're also seeing is this big divergence in game plan and tactics. Derrick Brunson is a wrestle boxer. He's a wrestle striker. He's primarily there to grapple with you, right? Same thing in this matchup. Gregor Gillespie, it's not like he has terrible hands, but he does his best work when he's in on takedowns, when he's forcing a top heavy pressure game, when he's on top of his opponents. But I'm looking back over the career of Gregor Gillespie, and I'm not loving the names that I'm seeing on his resume. I think that obviously a talented fighter. I think that Gregor Gillespie has a lot of upside, especially as a grappler, but he's going to be 34 years old coming into this contest, which I do think is starting to get a little bit up there for the lightweight division in particular. You got Brad Riddell on the other side. He's the younger man, 29 years of age. And Brad Riddell, I think the reason people are pushing this line further and further towards Gregor Gillespie, who, keep in mind, has not fought since 2019, where he was brutally knocked out at MSG by Kevin Lee. And that looked like the kind of knockout that could alter somebody's career, in my opinion. He was knocked stiff as a board and was out for several minutes. And I think that in some of his other fights, I've seen striking habits that could end in the same kind of situation. And so Brad Riddell on the other side here, an elite level striker. Brad Riddell has a kickboxing background, a Muay Thai background. He was the striking coach at Tiger Muay Thai, which is an excellent camp. And I believe that Brad Riddell here has value at his current plus 200 or so price. Now, could I look like an idiot if Gregor Gillespie goes out there, takes him down once and gets the submission? Yeah, sure, I could. But I think that Gregor Gillespie has had a lot of guys in the UFC that got taken down and panicked and froze up a little bit. I think that happened a little in the Vince Pichel fight, which surprised me because Vince Pichel is normally a very tough, gritty guy. But I thought that he kind of just conceded some positions there, knew that he was in for a rough and long night, didn't think that he had much upside. And he was also the older fighter that night. I think that Gregor Gillespie is used to being a hammer. And I think when he was the nail for even just a few moments against Kevin Lee, the moment sort of got to him. I'm worried that the same thing could happen to him here. Now, granted, I have another connection to this fight. Gregor Gillespie is a New York State champion. Okay. He's a wrestler out of this great state, just like myself. So I have love for Gregor Gillespie. I think he's a very talented guy, and his wrestling credentials are simply among the best in the UFC, period. However, Brad Riddell, in his fights, the reason this has been bet so heavily against him is that he's been taken down, I think, 11 times in 3 fights, or maybe even more, maybe up to 14 times in 3 fights, a really ridiculously high number. However, watch the tape on those, because the stat line isn't always what it seems. Brad Riddell was getting taken down, sure. Every time he's stubborn about putting his back to the cage. Every time he's stubborn about punishing with elbows, punches, getting back his footing, and using the time that he has on the feet to create damaging moments that make you not want to come back in to clinch, moments that make you second guess your ability to shoot a takedown and be safe. And what I've seen is that Brad Riddell has turned strikers like Magomed Mustafayev into panic wrestlers. And I do think that in this fight, Gregor Gillespie is going to look like a panic wrestler if he's not getting the submission. Now, granted, I think Gregor Gillespie is the higher level guy on the ground. If he's able to hold Brad Riddell in static positions, he's going to get the finish via submission, in my opinion. However, if he's not able to hold those static positions, I like Brad Riddell's cardio. I like his striking acumen. I think that this is the most live opportunity for Brad Riddell to get his first finish in the UFC by knockout. I think that Gregor Gillespie's chin is a little questionable. And so I haven't taken a stab on this yet. I'm going to wait and see how these guys look on weigh-in day. But I think that there might be value on Brad Riddell at that plus 225 number. And I think especially Brad Riddell inside the distance, because he hasn't been finishing people, I think that number might get inflated. I have to take a look closer at the prop markets here. But I think that Brad Riddell has a chance of getting his first knockout win in the UFC against Gregor Gillespie.
And that'll bring me to our last fight, too, the prelim of lightweight matchup between.
One last thing.
Oh, yeah, what's up?
Under 2.5. The under 2.5 rounds. That's what I wanted to point out. It's at minus 115. If you can't take a side in that fight like me, if you're having a little bit of back and forth questioning, minus 115, under 2.5 rounds, I think that has value.
Gotcha. Okay. So what was it again? Under 2.5 rounds, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Under 2.5 rounds. Remember that, folks. Now, last but not least, want to bring in the prelim lightweight. It's Leonardo Santos and Grant Dawson. So Santos coming in 18-3 overall. His last 5 fights, he's 5-0, 75-inch reach, but he's a little bit older. He's 41 years old, and then he's going up against a younger Dawson. Dawson coming in at 27 years old. He's 16-1. Last 5 fights, much like Santos, he's 5-0, and it's 72-inch for Dawson. So, where's the value between the veteran in Santos and the young gun in Dawson?
Man, B-Hall, that's a great question. I think that this is a tough fight from a betting perspective, but I wanted to throw it in there because this is a banger. This fight is amazing. It's on the prelim card. The UFC has a hard time when they have guys like Leo Santos who are older, savvy, technical, scary, frankly. If you watch this guy fight, he's a jiu-jitsu world champion, right? So you'd expect him to be going out there, setting up takedowns, working his submission game. No, almost never. These days in the UFC, he is trying to have standing kickboxing matches with people and knocking out people, 10 years younger than him. So I really think that Leo Santos is a dangerous guy. I think he's a fun fighter. I think he's got a lot to offer the division. He's coming back after a weird fight that he won. His opponent got released after that fight for several illegal strikes in the 3rd round. And he had kind of been cheating all about in a variety of different ways. So Leo Santos didn't have his best showing the last time out. I think that he was certainly gassed by that 3rd round, but he also gassed trying to murder his opponent. I mean, he basically landed 10 unanswered strikes that were all power shots. I'm talking walking him down with huge right hands. He landed a head kick while he was rocked that sent him stumbling between 2 feet. I wasn't really sure what Mark Goddard was looking for. If he wanted him to pull out a gun and start shooting at him or something. It was just incredible damage, incredible violence being put on display by Leo Santos. And he gassed himself just going all out for a finish. So I think that Leo Santos in this fight, everybody's on Grant Dawson. Bless up. Grant Dawson's a great fighter, got a lot of skills. Young man's coming up from featherweight to lightweight for this fight and got a pretty decent sized frame. He's going to be smaller than Santos in this fight. But I think that this should be a violence fight. I think that this should be a lot of fun. Grant Dawson does his best work on the ground, and Leo Santos is a 7-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, one of the best lightweight competitors in the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And on top of that, like I said, got knockout power. I think that this fight is definitely live to not go to decision. I would look at the value on that spot. And then I would also think, guys, don't lay minus 200 on Grant Dawson unless you're really sure. Because Leo Santos is 41 years old. I know he's an underdog in this spot, but he's come through as an underdog several times in the UFC, including in this range, the plus 160, plus 170 range. This is the kind of range where Leo Santos gets counted out and then knocks out Stevie Ray in the first round. So I think that Leo Santos, I wouldn't call him the side necessarily. I think Grant Dawson has more upside and better cardio. So I could see if this goes to decision, Grant Dawson becoming the side over time. But I do think that first round is going to be fireworks. And we could be seeing another Leo Santos walk-off knockout if Grant Dawson isn't very careful with his chin.
And that's everything from Liam picks fights, and we'd like to just wrap everything up too. So again, UFC Vegas 22 coming up here this weekend. So should be a good one. Liam, I love all the insight you've given per usual. And again, if you want to give him a follow on Twitter, make sure to head over to Twitter at Liam Picks Fights. We know him as Liam. You know him as Liam Picks Fights too. Liam, appreciate the time as always.
Thank you very much, B Hall. Everybody check it out because on Twitter I'll be dropping my official plays. You could also check betmma.tips/Liam Heslin where you can find written breakdowns to accompany my picks. Thank you all so much.
And now let's hit the hardwood. Let's go to the Commish and everything NBA. Commish, what's going on?
B Hall, great to have you back in the lineup tonight.
Hey, wow, that was really cheesy, I have to say. Wow, I appreciate the love, my friend. I can feel it all the way 2 hours away down Interstate 71 in Columbus since you're standing up in Cleveland. So I digress. So there's a lot of action going on this week. You had almost a nearly good week. However, the new rule that we are now instituting here on Informed Risk Taking is don't pick against the New York Knicks. You were the one who told me a couple weeks ago that you were very high in this team, and guess what? That was your team, and you picked against them. What is going on, dude? Like, can you please explain yourself?
Let me have it. I deserve it. I deserve it a ton. I looked at the game. Derrick Rose was out of the lineup. The Knicks have looked significantly worse without Derrick Rose. He's still dealing with some COVID stuff. I jumped on Brooklyn. It looked like the objectively better play. And of course, Brooklyn did lead by 18 late in the third quarter in that game. They looked like they lost their focus a little bit down the stretch, but it's a new rule. It's a new rule on the show. We're not betting against the Knicks. I don't care who they're playing. I don't care what the spread is. We're not betting against the Knicks.
I've wanted to let you have that ever since ever since you said the New York Knicks were going to make the playoffs right before the All-Star break and they were sitting fifth. Well, guess what, buddy? They're now bottom half of the playoff teams in the East for right now. So we'll see what happens, but I'm going to make sure I keep you in check moving forward too about the New York Knicks. But I know another game too that you did pretty well with was the Celtics and the Jazz. You literally made that perfect.
Yeah, it was one of my prouder moments. We said that Boston was probably going to keep that game close into the fourth quarter at home. We did say Utah has significantly better depth. Boston has had trouble closing out games late in the fourth quarter. They go heavy ISO late, good defensive teams. They're able to slow Boston down when it matters. It happened again. We again had the under in that game. So if you follow LFI Commish, you'll be able to hop on some of these free plays and hopefully be able to put a little bit of profit in your pocket.
Well, moving on, let's go to a couple games we got scheduled for this week. First and foremost, we'll jump into the Western Conference matchup between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Phoenix Suns. Minnesota, as of late, hasn't looked too great. They're 2-8 in their last 10. Phoenix, on the other hand, literally on the flip side, they're 8-2 in their last 10 as well. So I want to dive in briefly to the Timberwolves. Don't look now, but the Timberwolves are doing okay since the All-Star break. They're 2-2 right now. They're going to move forward and see what happens too. They're still working with their new coach and Chris Finch that they don't have too much confidence in. I know a lot of teams, a couple players around the league weren't too high on him, and yet the team's still struggling. However, Karl Anthony Towns is leading most categories as he should. He's filling in for D'Angelo Russell, who's been out with injury. And now on the flip side, the Suns just look really, really good right now. In the top five of the Western Conference for right now. We'll see if that stays towards the end of the season. Chris Paul's getting a lot of MVP arguments. DeAndre Ayton is finally starting to look valuable as he was in the first overall pick a couple years ago in the NBA draft. And Devin Booker doing Devin Booker things. Dude is scoring no matter what. So, one thing I've noticed so far, Commish, is the fact that you really like to see whoever the T-Wolves are playing week in, week out. Why is that?
Quite frankly, the Timberwolves, they don't have much talent on their team. You mentioned they brought Chris Finch in. They've played 9 games under his leadership. They're 2-7. It's clearly a talent issue. It wasn't just the coach. Since they brought Finch in, they're 27th in defensive efficiency, 22nd in offensive efficiency. They have the 3rd worst net rating in the entire NBA. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this team. I think you summed it up pretty nicely. whoever Minnesota's playing, it's probably worth taking a look at their opponent, whether to cover the spread or if it's a weaker team, taking the other team perhaps on the money line.
So, and then on the flip side too, the Suns, I mean, I think we talked previously too, you would take the Suns plus 75 points or something like that too. So, but they're having a fantastic season. Let's talk a little bit more about the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, Phoenix is this team, right? They had an amazing run in the bubble last year, and everybody was really high on them coming into this season. I don't think anybody had them sitting second in the Western Conference right now. They're right behind the Jazz. I will say behind Utah, they're probably the most complete team in the NBA. Their last 12 games, they're top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Similar to Utah, they're very, very deep. You mentioned Booker and Ayton and Chris Paul. They also have Mikal Bridges, Frank Kaminsky, Jay Crowder, Cameron Johnson off the bench. This team is really deep. They have 7 guys averaging double figures. They're shooting lights out from behind the three-point line. They defend the three-point line well. This team has a ton of weapons. They pass the ball well. I don't know what you don't like about Phoenix at this point. They had a little bit of a mishap against Indiana the other night. I don't know if they got caught flat-footed coming out of the All-Star break or what. They looked totally disinterested in that game after the first quarter. I don't think it's a big deal. I think this team has since then refocused, and I think they're going to be a threat to potentially get that number 1 seed in the Western Conference. I wouldn't sleep on Phoenix. I know they don't have a proven playoff track record, a lot of these young guys on the team, but like you said, bringing Chris Paul in there, he's been immensely valuable. It's very clear. The overall numbers for a lot of these guys have taken a dip, but the team is significantly better as a result of bringing him in.
Plus, I even like their head coach and Monty Williams too. I mean, I honestly thought he probably should have won. If there was an award for Coach of the Year or Coach of a couple weeks in that bubble last year, he probably should have won it because they did go undefeated in the bubble, but they couldn't make the playoffs. But moving on to the other game, I know you want to touch on a little bit. You have a lot of faith in the Indiana Pacers, as you mentioned before. We got into the NBA segment here, and they're going up against the Miami Heat upcoming. The Heat have struggled in the beginning of the first half, but since that first half struggle, they've been red hot. They're 9-1 in their last 10. On the other hand, Pacers are doing okay. They're still in the playoff race right now. I mean, the East is just so tight that, you could win a couple games here and there, like win the majority of your games during the week and probably be pretty decent, sitting pretty in the Eastern Conference Finals or Eastern Conference, I should say, if you were to make the playoffs tomorrow. But Heat looking really good, like I mentioned. Jimmy Butler finally looks healthy. Bam Adebayo's finally back in the lineup. And then on the flip side, Pacers have been lackluster. They've also had a lot of injury, really. I mean, I know a big one was Caris LeVert since the trade from Brooklyn. He had that big mass on his kidney that he just recently had removed. So he's finally back in the lineup. I don't know if he's having a lot of Victor Oladipo comparisons. I think that they are trying to rely him or they're going to try to rely on him like a Victor Oladipo. But, where's the value between the Heat and the Pacers right now?
So I think the value in this particular game is probably on the under, but I do like Indiana long-term right now. Depending what sportsbook you look at, you get maybe minus 175, minus 185 to make the postseason. To your point, currently they're sitting in one of those play-in spots. If they have a good week, they're not too many games out of having home court in the Eastern Conference. I do think they're probably the 5th or 6th best team in the Eastern Conference. If you look in December, first 5 games of the season before the Oladipo trade, they were 4-1, had the number 5 net rating in the NBA. They were 8-4 on January 14th. After they traded Oladipo, they went into this 8-16 spiral. They clearly missed his offensive playmaking, having another scorer out there. 16 of those 16 losses, 12 of those losses were by 10 points or less. They blew a couple of really embarrassing fourth quarter leads. The one against Atlanta, the one against Philadelphia coming to mind most notably. Getting LeVert back, I think, is going to remedy some of these issues. He's only been back for a handful of games, but again, we mentioned Phoenix. He looked pretty good the other night against Phoenix. He's not quite playing a full minutes workload at this point, still keeping him under 30 a game, but I think he's going to be a huge addition to this team that already has Sabonis and Brogdon averaging over 20 a night. They have Miles Turner leading the league in blocks. There's a lot to like about this team. I think they're much closer to that 8-4 start type team than they are to the 8-16 type team that they were post Oladipo when, like you mentioned, they had the medical condition with LeVert. I think that really set them back.
Yeah, so that should be a good matchup too, at least between the Pacers and the Heat. I really like the Pacers. A couple years ago when they had Victor Oladipo, I'm hoping that Caris LeVert can obviously, get over the health condition. And I say it like it's not a big deal. It is, obviously, but the Miami Heat too, ever since they were in the finals last year too, have been, didn't have the great start, but now that Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler are finally back in the lineup, I'm really liking to see what the Heat are going to do. So
yeah, they looked like one of the worst teams in the NBA when Butler was out of there. They went 2-8 without Butler in the lineup. He got back in. There was a little bit of an adjustment period getting him back in the lineup. I don't know if Butler was still dealing with the COVID stuff, but they haven't lost a game with Butler in the lineup in over a month right now. They have 11 straight wins when he's playing. They had a loss on March 2nd to Atlanta when he had a night off. But that's why I say I don't see much value on the spread in this game. I think Indiana is capable of winning this game, but until Miami proves anybody wrong, I mean, they get fourth best net rating in the NBA over the last 12 games for them. This is a really dangerous team. A lot of people forgot about them when Butler was out of the lineup. Like you said, they were struggling, but I think this team is a very serious threat to go back to the NBA Finals. I don't know if they're going to get there because there's some good teams at the top of the Eastern Conference, but this is a very, very good basketball team. I think people are going to remember that here pretty soon.
So, Commish, thank you as always for the time, and we will talk to you the end soon.
Thanks, P-Hawk.
And last but not certainly most least, it's Justyn Spansky to talk everything NHL. Justyn, how we doing?
Not bad, B-Hall. Good to have you back in the driver's seat this week.
Yeah, Liam did a good job, but it feels good to be back here in the driver's seat too. So I appreciate it, my friend, too. So, you had a pretty good couple last days. So what I'd venture to say, it's pretty decent, right? Especially you're probably counting all the money that you made off the Pittsburgh Penguins and Boston Bruins a couple nights ago, right? When the Penguins won 4-1.
A little bit, yeah. I don't know. A lot of people counted out Pittsburgh, I think, in that game. But, hey, I was riding the hot team there. Pittsburgh had a nice 5-game win streak coming in. So, you know what? Give me the Pens there. And Malkin, Gensel, Crosby, usual suspects right there. And we're producing some dough right there. Nice win.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, too. And, they've actually been able to do pretty decent in that Eastern Conference, too. But I digress. Let's get into a couple games we got upcoming here this weekend. Specifically want to go out to the West Division and then over back to the East Division. So let's start out with the West, too. I know a couple games you have tabbed are going to be Minnesota Wild against the Colorado Avalanche. The Wild right now, 17-8-1. Their last 10, they're 7-2-1. Avalanche, 16-8-2. Their last 10, they're 7-2-1. So it's a great matchup between the number 2 and 3 teams in the Western Division. Have a lot of implications about a postseason play here too, probably. So where's the value between the Avalanche and the Wild right now, Justyn?
Well, both teams are red hot coming in. Colorado coming in with a 4-game winning streak. Minnesota coming in with a 5-game winning streak. However, not going to go side here. I'm going to go total, and I'm going to go over 5.5. There's been a lot of talk this year about Colorado. They haven't really lived up to expectations. Offense hasn't been there. Yeah, Tuesday night, 8-4 win over the Ducks. That offense was on fire. I mean, power plays clicking, even strength goals. Nathan McKinnon looks like he hasn't skipped a beat since coming back from injury. I like the offense in this game. And even on the Minnesota side, too. Kirill, the Thrill, Kaprizov, rookie out of Russia, played a couple years in the KHL, highly, highly touted prospect, probably the leader right now for the Calder Trophy awarded to the Rookie of the Year. He's been nothing but sensational for them. I like a lot of goals in this game. Goaltending's been okay on both sides, but give me the goals here. We're going to smash the over.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a good matchup, too. This is coming this weekend against the Wild and the Avalanche. And then there's only one other game I know you had tabbed to. Again, should be a decent one. And this one was the one we mentioned is for the bragging rights of the East Coast. It's going to be in the East Division between the Philadelphia Flyers and the New York Islanders. Flyers haven't had too great of a season. They're 14-9-1 right now. The last 10, they're 5-5 at 500. New York Islanders, on the other hand, though, are having a really great season. They're 19-7-4. Their last 10 have been red hot, 9-1. So the Flyers could shake up the positioning in the East Division with the number 2 spot being held by the Islanders right now. However, with Pittsburgh being hot as of late, they could potentially play spoiler. The Flyers could for the Penguins to potentially, shake up the East Division a little bit too. But, where are you looking to see where the value is between the Flyers and the Islanders here for this bragging rights matchup?
Well, it's a good point that you bring up Philly trying to play spoiler here, but they're not gonna. Islanders, I think they're going to come in a little upset after having that 9-game win streak snap. And Andersley, their captain, one of their top forwards, out for the year, knee surgery, tough loss for them. But everybody's wondering, how have the Islanders been so good this year? Well, it starts on the back end with goaltending. Semyon Varlamov, 2.08 goals against average. He was 40 to 1. If you like prop bets, 40 to 1 to win the Vezina Trophy, award to the top goalie in the NHL coming in this year. I don't know if he's going to get it. Marc-Andre Fleury, who we've talked about before out in Vegas, he's been on fire, but Varlamov, you can't complain about the play from him. But also they've had a mix of old and young talent. You got guys like I really just don't. The team has, I think they've just played a great game. Like I was getting there, the old and young talent. I wouldn't even really call it that. I just think they mix so well and they just gel together. That's the thing. I don't think there's any division or separation with this team. It's just they play so fluid and so well together. I really like them here in this spot on home ice, and I think they're going to pick right back up where they left off and start another win streak coming up here.
Last but not least, this one doesn't concern a game. I know a couple weeks back we talked about the Calgary Flames and their new coach, or at least their newer or head coach in Darryl Sutter. Guy's been around the program and the franchise before, and he's back again. And ever since he took over for the Calgary Flames, he has been done pretty well for himself. He's 3-0 right now. What can you see where the success is coming from so far? Just, familiarity with the franchise, or what can it be?
It's something I like to call a little bit of tough love. Jeff Ward, players coach before, players like that, they like a coach to be able to relate to them a little bit. But any player who says they don't like to be coach hard or coach, right up on them all the time, they're lying. This is just nothing but a case of tough love. And I think he's getting the most out of this group. The group, this is their last chance. They don't produce here. They don't get their act together. It's out of town. Johnny Gaudreau, there's already been, talk about him potentially leaving at the end of the year. He's stepped up big since Sutter's came in. Sam Bennett's been inserted lineup, been a nice piece for them as well. Goaltending's improved as well, but it's just tough love, I think. And this is the type of style that Calgary has to play if they want to win hockey games. And Darryl Sutter's getting the most out of them. So we'll have to see how they do this weekend against Toronto. But hey, if they're in that underdog role, I like them in that spot.
So this has been Justyn Spansky on everything ice hockey and NHL related. You can follow him on Twitter at Justyn_Spansky. So Justyn, appreciate the time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome, B. Hall. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Well, that's all the time we have for Informed Risk-Taking show here on Delphi Sports. We thank you for tuning in, whether you're at home or on the go. Remember, you can follow along everything Delphi Sports on Twitter at Delphi Sports, along with Delphi Sports IRT for this specific show of Informed Risk-Taking. We're also on Instagram at Delphi Sports, so head over on Instagram to give us a follow. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Delphi Sports and look us up on Spotify, along with Stitcher and now Apple Podcasts at Informed Risk-Taking. And make sure to give us a follow, subscribe, whatever you have to do basically to get all of that content from Delphi Sports, whether it's audio or video. Make sure you take the best informed risk. Also remember, watch for Liam Pick's fights upcoming on Friday at 6 p.m. And then our next Informed Risk Taking will be Monday at 9 a.m. So for Liam, the Commish, and Justyn, I'm B. Hall saying so long until next time. Remember to take the best informed risk. Have a good night, everybody.